Thanks, Julie. Good morning. So, haven't even started yet, thank you. Yeah, anticipation. So, I was at dinner last night with some folks from Southern California that recently moved to Buffalo, which is not a move that I thought a lot of folks would have made until I experienced the weather this morning. This weather is amazing. Thank you for ordering that for me. I appreciate it. It's a beautiful place, Buffalo. We went on a tour yesterday of Buffalo and Niagara Falls, and saw just some of the amazing opportunities you guys have here in the greater Buffalo area with the commercial corridors and some of the housing projects. So I'm really excited. When you see the video that shows the 40-year video from LISC and all the awesome things that happen over the country, it really is the promise that opportunity zones could bring. We all know that there are some reasons to be cautious of opportunity zone development, but we want to talk today about how to be proactive and how to get in front of things and how to make the developments happen that you want. So I'm going to start with just some background on opportunity zones. Thank you. All right. How many experts do we have in the room? Darn, I was hoping to give this mic to somebody else. I'll start with some background on opportunity zones, and then leave the hard work to Bruce to talk to you about how to use them. So, where did they come from? Congressional Act 2017, Investing Opportunities Act. This number is a little bit outdated. The 2.3 trillion, I think, is closer to 6 trillion to be invested in unrealized capital gains in the marketplace. So, lots of money that could come into opportunity zones. Don't get too fixated on that because there's still hard work to do to get people to actually make those investments. But there's a lot of money out there that could go in that direction. This is not working. Okay, great. And where should it go? So more than half of America's economically distressed communities contain both fewer jobs and businesses in 2015 than they did in 2000. So the impetus to legislation is what we saw at the macroeconomic level across the country is that growth and investment was being concentrated in just a few cities, here 5 metropolitan areas around the country. That leaves a lot of people out, right? And so manufacturing and other forms of production go abroad, financial services and tech and all that stuff is concentrated in those cities, and we really sort of create 2 economies in this country, and we still have that problem today. So the question is, how do you force investment back into those other areas? And so they designated opportunity zones, specifically geographic locations, 8,672 of them around the country to say, investors, pay attention to these areas as well, and if you do, we'll give you significant tax breaks for doing that. So, where are the opportunity zones? So, the concept is a low-income census tract, or statistical area drawn by the census, and the governors have the ability to pick census tracts in their given states to designate as opportunity zones. 25% of low-income census tracts in the U.S. May be designated as OZs in a given state. And so, if you can see at this point, there are lots of different resources for maps where you can go online, EIG and some other sites as well, and actually see the geographical footprint of where the opportunity zones are. So that's no longer a mystery. Those have been selected. They can't be changed. There's some hope that maybe eventually in the future we'll get a second set if this program goes well, but as of now, they are what they are. Okay, so here's a number of census tracts. Interesting that if you look at the average poverty rate in the census tract, so I think in order to move investment into new areas, we tried to find census tracts that had been disinvested for a long time. And so I think that was accomplished overall. That's not to say that there are some selected opportunity zones where you make you scratch your head, like why is it an opportunity zone? But in most of the country and in most of the opportunity zones, they actually did accomplish the goal that we wanted in selecting disinvested and underinvested areas. So the average poverty rate in opportunity zones is 31%. We have some rural tracts as well as a lot of urban tracts. Average unemployment in those census tracts, 14.4%. So on the whole, the program, at least in its first stage, selecting non-census tracts did work. Okay, so let's talk about some of the strengths of the program. The next slide is the weaknesses, so you're not blind to that. The fact that it encourages local investments. So designations are made by the state instead of at the federal level. That's really good so that you have some local context for where opportunity zones should be. Flexible tools for investments. So it's not prescriptive. It doesn't say like new markets or LIHTC explicitly what you should invest in. It's fairly open. It does require equity investment, and there are some guide rails around the types of investments that qualify as new investments in opportunity zones. But it does leave a lot of space for different types of investments. So a lot of the business models and real estate investments you saw in the video are actually eligible for the program. New class of investors. So this is actually what I call the spotlight effect. So there's obviously the tax incentives that come along with investing, but then there's just new attention to these areas, which is really valuable. I mean, that attention comes from the municipal level, it comes at the community stakeholder level, it comes at the investor level. And so hopefully that creates new opportunities as well. The potential for the amount of investment dollars we talked about earlier, trillions of dollars, and how straightforward the tool can be applied. So there's not to say there aren't some complexities or opportunity zones. We will not get into those super complex areas today, but at its core level, it's really just equity that goes into these projects. Now, there are tax benefits experienced by the equity investor as a result of investing in the project, and there are qualifications on the project that we'll get into in a little bit here that make it eligible for opportunities on investment, but it really is just an equity investment in a project. So in that way, it's a bit simpler than some of the other community development incentives, tax incentives that have happened historically. Okay, some of the concerns, and this is just purely honest, but I think it's good to understand what the concerns are, especially as a community development industry, so that we can get ahead of those and make sure that we are laying the groundwork appropriately. So a lack of oversight. So because the program is so open, it is not super prescriptive about exactly what you must do, and it's not descriptive about what qualifies as a community beneficial investment. It doesn't say anything about that. You don't have to do anything that benefits the community. You just have to find a project that qualifies for opportunities on investment, and then make that investment and have your equity returns be what they are. A lack of impact incentives. This is actually something that, so in legislation itself, there's no additional tax break for projects that are really community focused. And so at the federal level, it treats all projects the same. There are some states, and then even some localities, that actually have worked to try to increase the incentives for community beneficial projects. California's done some of that, Colorado as well. And so there's work that can be done there at the local, the state, and even county level to try to change some of the permitting processes. We have a playbook on our website called the Opportunity Zone Playbook, and it talks a little bit about how to incentivize community beneficial projects, even though the federal legislation doesn't make a distinction. Gentrification and displacement. So this is what keeps me up at night. Trying to think about how we bring growth to these communities, additional opportunity, without displacing the entire population and just turning it over into sort of a new community altogether. How do we create ladders so that from a workforce perspective and from a housing perspective, the existing community can benefit from the growth that comes to that area as a result of those investments. And then the future of other tax incentives. So the importance of this program's success can't be understated. It's sort of the flagship right now for the latest version of community development tax incentives. And so Congress will be looking closely to see types of projects come out of it and how beneficial they are. Already we've had some positives and some negatives in terms of like press coverage for projects. So our job here today and as an organization is to try to get as many positive marks for good community development as we can. Okay, so how does the incentive work? And I'm sorry, some of you already know this, but we're just going to go through it at a medium speed. And if you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll stop and answer them. So there are three benefits from a tax perspective for the equity investor that invests in opportunity zone project. The first is the deferral of capital gains taxes. So when I have a gain, instead of paying that capital gains tax right away, I can defer paying that capital gains tax until 2026. The second is the reduction in the amount of those taxes. So the amount of tax I pay in 2026 can be reduced by 10 or 15%, depending on how long I've been in the new investment. So I may pay fewer taxes in the future. And the last is the cancellation of taxes on the new capital gains. So I took my capital gains, I moved it into this new investment. Now it grows again. And if I hold that investment for 10 years and I pay nothing in terms of capital gains taxes on that new capital gains. So there's three benefits. I'd say in terms of the importance of these benefits, the third is the most important in terms of an ROI basis. The first, deferral tax, is probably the second, and the reduction is the third. So I put them in that order. To give you sort of an example of how substantial this tax incentive can be, we have two scenarios, and I'll start with the fully taxed investment scenario. So if you had a gain of $100,000, let's say you invested $1 million and you made 10%, you have a gain of $100,000. You would historically pay tax on that gain right away, $25,000, leaving you $76,000 in your pocket from your gain. And then you would invest that $76,000 over 10 years, theoretically, at 10% annual investment appreciation. You end up with this big amount of money, $197,000. Again, you pay taxes on that new gain, and then your after-tax funds available with $168,000. So you paid capital gains twice. You paid it early, and you left the money in for 10 years. This is where you ended up. And then coming to the other side here. You had a $100,000 gain, you found an opportunity zone investment, and you took that $100,000 and you put it in that investment. So you paid zero right away, you'll pay it later on down here. And then you actually, when you do pay it, you don't pay $24,000, you pay $20,000 because you had a discount. That's the discount on what you pay in 2026. But the most important part is, since you had $100,000 to reinvest, you reinvested it for 10 years at 10%, and you actually ended up with $260,000 instead of $200,000. So in the end, you ended up with $238,000 instead of $168,000. Went through that at medium speed. How are we doing? Okay. You'll have these slides. Email me if you have questions. But needless to say, it's a significant tax incentive. It is somewhat reliant, this difference is somewhat reliant on the 10%, it's very reliant on the 10% annual investment. So as your return rate goes down, the difference gets smaller. Just a full disclosure, right? Okay, so translation. We just sort of dipped our toe into the opportunity zone tax incentive world. If you talk to attorneys, they will take you much deeper. Don't let them scare you. You can keep it fairly simple and straightforward. But in thinking about what opportunity zones and what the tax incentives actually mean in the marketplace, the direct effects are as follows. More equity dollars looking for investments because they like this tax incentive. They'll be looking at projects and zones, opportunity zones, or in geographies that they otherwise would not have looked at. Historically, commercial private equity real estate was really follow the leader, right? So you would mostly just invest in areas that are already doing pretty well, with few exceptions. And so getting investors to look at new areas of the city or areas that have been underinvested, very, very difficult. No one thought they had to do it. So this is actually a big effect of the program. Willing to accept lower pre-tax returns on investment. So this is a tricky one. Theoretically, because they're getting a tax break, they should be able to accept lower pre-tax returns. So you should be able to squeeze a bit more money out of the project we like to think of that as you should be able to increase the impact effects of the project. So maybe the rents can be a little bit lower because it's an opportunity zone project, and that can help people who can't afford higher rents. That, of course, is also the other part of that. The other part of consideration for the investor is not losing their principal. So you still have to show that the investment has reasonable safety in many cases, but they can accept a lower pre-tax return. They need to hold the acquisition for 10 years. They want to be able to sell after that 10-year period. So keep that in mind as you think about responsible exits. So one of the things we try to keep in mind is we don't want to, in year 11, kick all the underserved folks out and make the whole thing market rate. We want to find some way to reasonably transition or reasonably exit from the project, and that affects the investor's return. So you have to sort of keep that in mind as you're talking to investors about your projects. And then lastly, willing to take a bit more risk. I put questions behind this because it differs. Again, they already have a game in hand, so they don't want to lose that. So super risky investments just depends on who you're talking to. What we found is principal protection is pretty important in this market right now. The indirect effects, more development in underserved areas, employment opportunities, contagion value effects in real estate, and more incentives to invest in business. So there are lots of positive indirect effects that come from the legislation as well. How many more slides do I have?
That's 11.
5, okay, all right. So we talked a little about LISC track record. I mean, 40 years that we've been investing in these communities already, with LIHTC and new markets and pre-development lending programs and grants. We sort of backtracked our investments in OZs nationally before they became OZs. And the number is $2.3 billion of invested opportunity zones already. And some other stats about NEF and some of our affiliates as well. Let's just go on to the next one, it's fine. This is our role in opportunity zones. Many people ask, what can the CDFI do? CDFIs have traditionally been involved in lending, and opportunity zones are all about equity. So the question is, what can we do? Well, the group that I started with Maurice, our CEO, you saw in the video, is actually the equity arm of LISC. And so we're focused on opportunity zones, and we're decided to fulfill the following roles. Impact investor. So we're not here to compete with existing impact funds and OZ funds. We're here to support them. We will create a fund if we need to get money for projects that we believe in. But we can play the role of being an impact investor. We've managed equity funds in the hundreds of millions of dollars for a long time. Developer and business owners. So we partner with developers and business owners as we have historically with early stage lending to help their projects get off the ground. We have a really exciting initiative going on, being launched in the next couple of weeks. That's a pilot in just a few cities that we hope to expand for doing additional pre-development grants for opportunity zone projects, but trying to push to fruition business investments and real estate investments in opportunity zones. The third is working with local stakeholders. So like this meeting here today, thank you, Julie, convening folks. Talked about this last night in an attempt to find a way to have folks coordinate on their plans and opportunity zones. One of the things that's really important for investors to see is that there is an overall plan for how we get these areas to sort of mature. And again, in a responsible way that's inclusive, but investors need to see more than just one building going up in a new area. We want to see a plan. And so getting folks together to talk about the areas of the city that need help and what that help needs to be and how to create developments that fulfill that. And then the final one is community development. So this is research and just sort of industry thinking about community development. A lot of what Bruce does as well, and the playbook is an example of that. Okay, I'll go through this again at medium speed. The second set of regulations. This was a slide particularly relevant when we were doing this in May, because the second set of regs came out. But they did add a bit more flexibility and clarity to how you would proceed with opportunity zone investments. Released April 17th. One of the questions was about can you sell out of an investment inside of 10 years and then reinvest in another investment and still keep your sort of 10-year hold period tenure? And they sort of clarified that. They gave you a 12-month window to basically recycle money from one investment to the next. You can reinvest your internal gains, clarity on the 10-year exit rules, and provide an alternative mechanism for investors to exit the deal after 10 years. So some clarity around how you can manipulate and move within the 10-year period with respect to being in and out of assets. Now, it's not going to be easy to do that, and the legislation wanted to encourage long-term holds for assets because they wanted to have patient capital come into these communities. But you can, if you need to, move in and out of different assets within the investment as long as you're within those time periods. Fund distributions, this gets a little bit more complicated. There's some questions around whether or not, as a fund manager, your carried interest qualifies for opportunity zone benefits. The answer is no. Only the initial capital gains investment does. And they did allow for some refinancing to distribute money back to investors. So in some cases, you can completely equity finance a project initially, and then bring debt in later, and then you can take the proceeds from the debt as distributions to the original investors to get the capital stack back to something that makes sense. What qualifies as qualified opportunities on property? The one I like the most is the 5-year vacancy rule. So in order for a project to qualify as OZ property, you have to substantially improve the asset in order for it to qualify as new use. And that means you have to double the basis in the actual building itself, not the land. So if you bought, and we'll go through an example later on in my second presentation, you bought a building or a site for $5 million, the building's worth $2 million, you have to put $2 million, or let's say $3 million, you have to put an additional $3 million into renovating the building in order for it to qualify as new use. This actually gave an exception for buildings that have been vacant for 5 years. So particularly in Buffalo, where there's some vacancy in the building stock, this would be a really valuable thing so that you don't have to actually spend a ton of money. You obviously have to bring it up to code and to good use, but you don't have to spend twice the value of the building in order for it to qualify. So I think this is a really good thing in cities that have experienced some amount of vacancy. In business investing, they qualified the rules around what qualifies a business to be located in an OZ. For a while, there was a lot of confusion about making sure that all your revenue came from inside the OZ, which is not reasonable. And so there's 50% rules that allow you to qualify a business as being in an OZ if you meet any of those qualifications. And then they actually loosen the qualifications on like the timing for when assets need to be invested in a qual itself. So this will all be available to you guys. I'm not going to go super deep into it because it's a lot of tax and finance work. But is that the last slide?
We've got 7 more.
7 more? Wow. I think we're good. I'm going to move it on.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys.